The governor vessel. The governor vessel starts from above the anus and then goes all the way up on the dorsal midline. It goes up the neck and to the top of the head and then down the nose and ends at the upper lip. The first acupoint is GV1. On the lumbar region, GV3 and GV4. On the lumbar, on the thoracic will be GV14. On the cervical region, GV16. And at the top of the head, GV20. And on the mouth, GV26. In the mouth, GV28.
First acupoint is GV1. Pick up the tail and it is in between the anus and the base of the tail. Next is GV2. GV2 is on the dorsal midline in the middle of the spine. GV2 is in between the sacral and the caudal vertebra.
Next is lumbar bihui. Lumbar bihui is an extra point and it is in between the 7th lumbar vertebra and the 1st sacral vertebra. Above that, GV3. GV3 is in between the spinal processes of the 4th and 5th lumbar vertebra. GV4 is in between the spinal process of the 2nd and 3rd lumbar vertebra. Next is GV5. GV5 is in between the spinal process of the 1st and 2nd lumbar vertebra. Next, we'll look into the governor vessel acupoints that are on the thoracic region. GV6. GV6 is in between the spinal processes of the 11th and the 12th thoracic vertebra. Next is GV7. You go one above GV6 and it is between the 10th and the 11th. Next is GV8. It is in between the 9th and the 10th. You skip one and next is GV9. It is in between the 7th and the 8th. Next is GV10 in between the 6th and the 7th. Next is GV11. It is in between the 5th and the 6th. And you skip one. And next is GV12. It is in between the 3rd and the 4th. And next is GV13. It is in between the 1st and the 2nd. Then you go up the neck and to the top of the head and then to the front of the face. At the neck, there is GV14. It is in between the spinal processes of the 7th cervical vertebra and 1st thoracic vertebra.
Next is GV16. It is at the back of the head, in between the skull and the 1st cervical vertebra, in the depression of the foramen magnum.
Next is GV20. It is at the cross point of the line connecting both ear tips and the dorsal midline. It is at the top of the head. Then it goes to the nose and the face. Next is GV25. It is at the midpoint of the external nostrils. And then you go down. Next is GV26. It is 1/3 from the upper lip. Next is GV28. Lift the upper lip and it is inside the mouth. It is the last acupoint of the governor vessel. First acupoint is GV1. It is the depression in between the anus and the base of the tail. The depression in between the anus and the base of the tail. GV1. And you go above the tail there is GV2. And above that, there's lumbar bihui. Lumbar bihui is not on the governor vessel. It is an extra point that is in between the 7th lumbar vertebra and the 1st sacral vertebra. And next, there's GV3 in between the 4th and the 5th lumbar vertebra, in between the spinal processes. And you go up, and in between the 2nd and the 3rd lumbar vertebra in the spinal processes, you have GV4. And you go one up, and in between the 1st lumbar vertebra and the 2nd lumbar vertebra, in between these spinous processes, you have GV5. And you go up, and in between the spinal processes of the 11th and the 12th thoracic vertebra, there is GV6. And next, you go one up again, and in between the spinal processes of the 10th and the 11th thoracic vertebra, there is GV7. And you go one up again, and in between the 9th and the 10th thoracic vertebra, in between the spinal processes, there is GV8. Next is GV9. It is in between the 7th and the 8th thoracic vertebra, in between the spinous processes. You go up again, and you have GV10 in between the 6th and the 7th thoracic vertebra, in between the spinous processes. You go up again, and you have GV11 in between the 5th and the 6th thoracic vertebra, in between the spinous processes. And you go up again, and you have GV12 in between the 3rd and the 4th thoracic vertebra, in between the spinous processes. It is GV12. And you go up again. You have GV13 in between the 1st and the 2nd thoracic vertebra, in between the spinous processes. And next, you have GV14 in between the spinal processes of the 7th cervical vertebra and the 1st thoracic vertebra. And then you go to the head top. At the very top, there's GV20. And then it goes to the face, and there's GV25. It is at the midpoint of the external nostrils. And then you go to the lips, upper lips, and you have GV26. Next, GV28. When you lift the upper lip, inside the mouth on the vein, you have GV28.